So, you've written a book.
Yes.
It's set in Victorian times.
It is.
But it doesn't feature street urchins and chimney sweeps. What is it about?
This is about one man's trip to the moon. Loads of people have done that stuff. This is nothing new. A book that takes somebody from Victorian era up to the moon. What's different in this is, did he get there or not? It's the whole conspiracy theory thing. You've heard of the conspiracy of whether America went to the moon in 1969, And the thing with that was, why would they bother? Why would they bother going to the moon? You had the Russians and you had the Americans fighting this great space race to put a man on the moon. And really, at that time, the only person who would have known if one of their rockets had got to the moon was the person who was in the rocket. Nobody else on the planet would really know for certain. So all you had to do was not be the first person to put a man on the moon, but the first person to say you'd put someone on the moon. Because as soon as you've said that and everybody's believed you, everybody else is going to think, well, why would we now bother to spend all that money to put the second person up there? Because they're only ever going to be the second person, even if they are actually really the first. And that was the idea I came at with this. You've got the books that say, man went to the moon in this wonderful rocket. He probably didn't, and we assume that he didn't. So in this, it's all about the conspiracy theory, the whole conspiracy theory. Did he get there? Did he not get there? And what happens to him afterwards?
The whole book sounds quite satirical.
It is satirical. It's I've read quite a bit of steampunk kind of stuff. Steampunk being stuff that's set in the past, but is still science fiction based, with things that you wouldn't expect to be there. Inventions that we would probably say hadn't been invented then. And it's the mixture of those two things of historical fact and historical figures, even with fictional characters and futuristic things that shouldn't be there. I just like that idea of things like that.
Let's talk about when it's set, because you've been very specific in the years. I believe 1895?
1895.
Okay.
Specifically, it starts in 1895. It moves about a bit, but it does start in 1895. And the reason for that is the house that we're sitting in, my house, was built in 1895.
Really? You've done a good job keeping it up.
Thank you. It's still there. It's falling in a few places, but it's
see light switches.
It's still going. Yeah. And that was it. I was just interested. I'm going to be sitting in my house writing about something that I'm setting in the past. Where do I set it? I set it in the same year that the house came from, and then it feels right.
Yes.
As I move around the house, it feels like a Victorian house, and I was able to get into character by using the character of the house.
Okay, let's talk about your main characters. So I believe there's a lead. This is the person who may or may not have gone
There are three leads, yes.
Okay.
There's one lead, which is a fellow called Gordon Periwinkle. The book, The Giant Step, is the first of a series of books. The overarching title is The Periwinkle Perspective, because everything is focused around this character of Gordon Periwinkle. He is this Victorian adventurer who goes off and discovers things that have been discovered before. And he's a bit of a bumbler. He's not that good at stuff. And when they're looking for somebody to send to the moon, they decide, let's send him because he's expendable. Doesn't matter if he gets killed on the way and stuff. He's really not that good. But they send him up there, and by sending him to the moon, he then becomes the most famous person on the planet who's never been on a stamp or a coin, just by virtue of having done that, which makes him a bigger character. And he's not that big a character himself. So he's trying to live up to that character and failing just a little bit. He's a man with a lot of flaws. And then you have the other two lead characters in this first book. One is Handel Blaze, who is a professor. She's the inventor royal for Queen Victoria, and she invents all sorts of stuff that we're told wasn't invented in those days. Things like rockets and stuff, and bionic arms and stuff that people need. So she's a big, very strong character. And then there is another character called Iggy Shikiwana, who is a female assassin. So there are two very strong female characters.
Best kind of assassin. If you want an assassin, you want a woman to do it.
She's tough. She's a right piece of work. But she's also, again, a very flawed character, because she doesn't want to be an assassin, and she wants to get out of the assassin game, and you can't get out of the assassin game. So she's got all that going on, and her involvement is that she is tasked with killing him off, because he's better off dead. He knows too much. So she has to go try and kill him, and he's trying to deal with his problems, and she's dealing with her problems, and all the rest of the time the professor is making things that help them.
You've already told me that you're inspired by the home that you live in.
Yes.
What else inspired these characters and the world you created?
It's the sort of thing I like reading. I've written a lot in the past, but this is the first time I've written something like this. I've written music in the past, and I wrote the sort of music that I liked listening to. The same with poetry. I've written poetry that I like to hear. I'd never tried to write a story in the kind of things that I liked to read.
Right.
For some reason, I thought the sort of people who wrote the kind of stuff I liked to read were some kind of superheroes, and there was something extra going on that I could never do. And then I thought, you've got to try these things, and so I started to write this story. I used to run short story nights in cafes and pubs where I'd invite people in to read their short stories, and I would always have to have 2 new stories every month that we did this as well, and sometimes more if somebody didn't turn up. And so I got myself into a habit of writing short stories on a 2 or 3 a month basis. And then that all finished. It finished because various venues that we used to do this either closed or changed their ideas, and I found myself without a venue, but still with this mindset of must write these short stories. And I decided to write a short story that was in the vein I liked reading in. Absolutely loved it, and didn't have anywhere to perform it because the gigs had gone. And I thought, I haven't got to write another one next month. I could just keep going. So this actually started
like Charles Dickens. Yeah. All of his books were all made up of short stories, right?
Yeah. Well, this started like that. The prologue to the book was the original short story, and then I just went further on with it because that just left the whole thing on a cliffhanger, and I kept going until I told the story I wanted to tell, and I thought, there's more. It's all in here. There's more. So if you're trying to publish a book, you finish your book first and then you take it out and try and show it to various publishers. If you're trying to write a series of books, you need to have at least 2 sitting there so that you can say, this is what I've got, but this is where it goes afterwards. Otherwise, why would they publish you in case you can't come up with another one? So I'd written 2, and then we started trying to get it published, and it takes a long time.
It does
punt
take
stuff
a long
around to
time.
publishers. Anyway, eventually we get a bite from a publisher, but by this point I've written the best part of book 3. So I know exactly where this is going, and I thought, right, 3 will be the end, I'll wrap it up. And then my brain said, no, there's more, make it bigger, bring more stuff in. So I've had a great time with this and built up this world and all these characters, and as the story progresses, more characters come in. I start small, start with a small band of people that then grows as you get further out, so that I can build on these characters' lives and their backgrounds.
It's a great book, and the satirical element really intrigues me because we live in a world of fake news, Russian bots and Facebook and whatever, all these mad things. How much did the political climate we're in now inspire the events that take place in your novel?
It does quite a bit as it goes through. There is a prime minister that comes into it towards the end of the second book.
It's messy hair.
And he doesn't look like that particular prime minister, but he acts very much like him. And that there is a theme in there that I wouldn't give away without somebody reading it. But yes, it does inspire. The stuff around you inspires. The people around you inspires. When you're saying about the satirical element of it, when I decided that the book was going to be based around this whole idea of the conspiracy theory of did the Americans really go to the moon in 1969, or did they not? Did they just say they went? That whole thing, people will say, well, it's nonsense. We wouldn't have this and we wouldn't have that if they hadn't gone there. But in my mind, that's always intrigued me, and I loved that little idea of what if they didn't? What if they just said they did? Who's going to prove them wrong? And I love that. Now, if you're going to set a book around that and you're going to set it in a historical setting and bring in fantastical elements and hugely drawn characters, it's not going to be 100% serious, is it? So there has to be a satirical element of it. And I've been writing comedy for years, doing the anti-poet stuff, that to actually sit and write something serious goes against the grain.
Absolutely.
Now, I have done stuff, but yeah, it's difficult to sit and be serious because you part of your brain is trying to find the humour in the situation. And I didn't want this to be an out-and-out laugh-a-minute book. I don't want somebody to label this as a comedy book, because it isn't a comedy book. Some of the situations are a little bit ridiculous, and some of the characters and some of the things they say are a bit ridiculous, but it's feeding into a story that stands up and makes sense. That was what I was aiming at.
You spoke a bit about writing a book that would be like the book kind of books you like to read.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell me a bit about novels that you like that maybe inspired this book or inspired your writing?
Yeah. Well, one of my favourite authors, and has been for years, is Christopher Fowler. Have you come across Christopher Fowler?
Please tell me about him.
Christopher Fowler writes, the majority of his books are written about London, and London is one of the characters in the books. He knows everything about London, all the tunnels underneath London, all the secret societies and things. And the book is not about those things that he writes. The books are about characters and situations. But there's always an element of learning from his books, because as you read, you discover things about this great city that you didn't know. And I've loved that in his books, and it makes me then go and read up on something. It's just a slight mention he'll make of some secret society or some secret passageway, and then you go and you look and you find it's actually true.
Right.
And obviously he's added to it and he's made it bigger, but I absolutely loved that in his books, and I've read all of his books because that really does it for me. I also enjoy another writer, Colin Edmonds, who's published by the same publishing company as my book is about to be published by, Caffeine Nights. And Colin is a steampunk writer. Now Colin, he originally was a comedy writer. That was his career. He wrote for Bob Monkhouse and Paul Daniels and people back in the 60s and 70s. And he's got a font of knowledge about how to put comedy together and how to make a situation amusing but still serious. And he also knows all the magic tricks and things because he wrote for Paul Daniels. And the characters in his books is a stage magician. And so you're learning things again. You're picking stuff up that you probably didn't know. And I love that in a novel where you're finding things out that are true and real that you may not have known. And so you're reading something that is fiction, but it's also working as a non-fiction.
Yeah, and it brings adventure into your life.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that in that sort of situation. And so that's what I've tried to do. I don't think I'm emulating anybody else that I've read. I just like to do that. And the research is one of the most fun things about writing anything at all, whether you're writing comedy and you're trying to make something right. As you go looking to check your facts, you find something else you didn't know, and then you realise you just spent an hour reading about Mars or something, which is what I tend to do.
Okay, so we know when it's set.
Yes.
Where is your book set?
It's set in London. The majority of the first book in the series is set in London, but there are a few little forays out to Cardiff and the Moon, obviously.
Well, it might be the Moon.
It might be the Moon, it might not. No. I know London because although I don't live in London, I've always lived near London, and London has always been a place I've gone in to work, to gig, performing. So I know it, and I've always felt like a Londoner who lives in the country around London, if you know what I mean. So I've set it in places I know, and I've then gone and researched those places so that I know them better.
I'd like to ask you about the conspiracy theory side of things. Now, I've read up on the moon landings and the conspiracy theory side of that, and I'm embarrassed to say it's quite convincing. You know, when you read it and you have it all in front of you, it doesn't feel like a stretch to say it was fake, even though I don't think it was. I don't think people who think it was are mad. I guess my question to you is basically, do you think they were faked? And also, are there any crazy conspiracy theories that you do believe in?
Well, no, that is one. I've read a lot and seen a lot of that and tried to keep a mind open. Whenever you hear some conspiracy theory, you look into it just to have a look, see if you think it's real or not. And sometimes I come out thinking, I think that is true. And then sometimes I think it's not. The moon landing specifically, I've read a lot about that. And I just think at that time where you had the Russians and you had the Americans, and they were both locked in this space race to get the first person on the moon. Did they go or not? Because it would have cost an awful lot of money to get there. And whoever got there first is going to say they're there. Nobody else is going to go up to check, because what's the point of paying all that money to be second? So whoever gets there first has made that giant step. So I don't think they went.
My thing is that, think about America in that time and what they were doing. This is not like an innocent person. This isn't like accusing somebody who butter wouldn't melt in their mouths. You know, this is a country where there were civil rights issues in that country. They were deposing people out of office in other countries because they didn't like their politics. They were invading other countries. So, you know, add fake moon landing to the list. That's probably
it's the sort of thing they'd do. You know?
It's like the least harmful thing they actually probably did. However, I'm 50-50 on it, but that's good to know, because that means in the book.
No, we don't know for certain, do we?
You'd have to read the book.
You'd have to read the book to know.
Let's talk about it. So is it out already?
It comes out on the 26th of November.
Okay.
Should have been April this year, but of course a lot of things have happened this year. A lot of books got postponed. I was very disappointed because I was really eager for this to come out, and I had lots of things to go and do, literary fairs and things to go and talk to people about it, and it all got cancelled.
Okay, well, let's talk about it. What is happening? 26th of November, it will be released.
It will be released.
Bookstores and online, hopefully.
Yes.
What are you going to do? How are we going to celebrate?
Well, in the past when I've published books, we've always had a big do and invited people round and cake and stuff. But we can't do that anymore.
Right, it has to be virtual cake.
It's going to all have to be virtual. So it's all going to have to be done online in this kind of way, of me sitting here in front of a camera talking to people and trying to convince them to buy the book.
Victoria, Regina, Queen of Steam, punctilious proponent of the dream, our patron pushing boundaries.